Seeing none, we are reconvened. I'm going to just restate this is our Tuesday, March 31st, 2026 special meeting of the City of Madison Plan Commission. We've completed our roll call. Our meeting is being recorded. And so if your microphone has a green light, it's live and it will be recorded. But I'm not sure if the live stream is working or not. We do have the ability to display materials as we go through them on the agenda, so we will, the live stream is great. So we will just kind of go through the agenda as contemplated, just a little late. So thanks everybody for your patience. Let's start with, we did complete our roll call with, and we'll have that minutes. Our first item is time for public comment on items not on the agenda. And I just confirm that we don't have any registrants for it.
No, there are no registrants.
Okay. All right. The next item is time for disclosures and recusals. The city's ethics code requires disclosure and recusal for from the Plan Commission members based on items in tonight's agenda. Does anyone have any disclosures or recusals? All right. Seeing none. We usually have time for a reminder for our schedule of meetings. April is tomorrow, and we have 2 April meetings on Monday the 13th and Monday the 27th of April, and then we have a meeting on May 11th. Also, all of those Monday afternoon at 5:30 virtual meetings as usual, and then we have our next special meeting Thursday, June 11th, 2026 at 5 p.m. In this building, and probably across the hall in 215. So that is our preliminary agenda items, and we will now get into our special items of business, and we are going to stick with the order of the printed agenda. So our first item is Legistar 92430, which is our Planning Division Annual Report and 2026 Work Plan Highlights. And so we'll hear from Director Kettle and Division 13.
Okay, thank you, Chair. This will also include a bit of a discussion at the end about the Planning Commission's work plan for 2026, which is a new item for your discussion this year. So I'm going to run through this presentation both as an opportunity to provide some highlights from 2025 from our annual report that was published last week, and also use it as a space to look forward to some things that we're going to be doing in 2026. In the agenda for this meeting, we provided a link to the annual report, which I noted is for the first time this year provided as an online report using our website. We're excited about this. It's definitely a different way to experience an annual report, but we are happy to be able to provide a report this way, particularly to increase the accessibility of our annual report this year. I also want to note that of the things that we'll talk about tonight within both the work plan and the look back on last year's activities is that this will just touch on a small portion of the Planning Division's work and is most relevant to the work that the Plan Commission does. So the highlights that I'll share tonight touch on 5 of the 8 services that the Planning Division is responsible for. And even within those services, there are many more activities that we do. So starting with some of the kind of bread and butter work that we do, in 2025, the annual report noted that we had just over 100 meetings and engagements that were associated with the 3 area plans that were underway last year. There were lots of different ways that those meetings took place, be it formal presentations and conversations or more informal opportunities for engagement, such as out in neighborhood parks or other activities within the community. Our staff attended 31 meetings about development proposals. So these are meetings that the council office helps schedule with alders and applicant teams, and our staff attends those meetings to help provide additional information and context as community members are learning about projects before they come before you. These are optional meetings that do not occur for every project, but when requested, the staff try to attend and support those. And then the Planning Division supports 6 boards, committees, and commissions. Obviously the Plan Commission, the Landmarks Commission, and Urban Design Commission, which you hear about a lot. We also staff the Joint Campus Area Committee, the Madison Arts Commission, and the Joint Campus Area Committee. Did I say that twice? There's another one in there that I'm forgetting. Downtown Coordinating Committee, thank you. So we staffed 88 meetings for those 6 boards, committees, and commissions last year. As the team was doing our work, a big focus of the kind of written material that we were producing last year was to increase the accessibility of our documents. I think for those of you that are on the Plan Commission, you know that a lot of times there can be jargon and very specific terms that we use when we're talking about the approvals that we're considering, the activities that are underway. We've been trying to focus on using more plain language in our work, so trying to use terms and phrases that more people would be familiar with to help increase the accessibility of our work itself. So there's been a focus on that kind of across the board, especially in really important, what we would call key documents. And one of the things that we did this year was actually we updated our application for our art grant program with an eye towards plain language to make that application more accessible. We also worked on creating an actual accessible, like a reader accessible version of our Plan Commission submittal schedule. So that is now available as an alternative format to the schedule that applicants use to bring items before the Plan Commission. We've worked on updating our website and other documents as well, and are trying to find other ways that we can incorporate plain language into the work that we do. So as we look ahead to 2026, one of the big things that we will be focused on is the transition in our principal planner role for the neighborhood preservation planning and design section. At the end of 2025, Bill Fruehling retired after 25 plus years with the city. And so we will be, we look forward to welcoming a new principal planner into that position. I mentioned already that we launched our annual report as a digital annual report this year, and that coincided with the launch of our new website. I don't know if any of you had an opportunity to take a look at our new website. It's something we're really excited about. It's a much more accessible format just across the board, and allows us to present our work to the community in much more engaging ways. So this is something that's been a long time coming for the planning division. We were one of the last city agencies to actually get our new website, and we're very happy to see it. So we'll be working out a few kinks that we've discovered already through launching that, as well as building on a few additional upgrades that are coming as we get a little more settled in with that website. Related to that, we will also be working on continuing to make our documents more accessible, specifically around PDFs. As all of you know, a lot of PDFs are produced in our office. And so we have a mandate and an interest in making sure that those documents are more accessible from an ADA accessibility perspective. So we are going to be working on prioritizing, again, those key documents that need to be accessible and working with our IT department to do that, but also thinking about new ways that we can present our information so that we are not uploading 200-page PDFs to the website for everything we do. So the annual report was one way that we're trying to test alternative ways that we can provide our information in a digital first format. And we look forward to thinking about other ways we can do that as we move forward. And then we'll also be doing an annual update to our results Madison, which are some of our key metrics that we use to measure both our progress and our performance in all of our service areas. So this will be something that, especially for the alders that are on the commission, you will see when we get into the budget process. So the next service that I want to provide some highlights in is for our plan creation service. So this is something that the commission sees a lot of. I think you know a lot about our area planning work in particular, our comprehensive planning work as well. So in 2025, we made substantial progress on the Southeast and Southwest area plans, and we kicked off at the end of the year the downtown area plan. You may remember that we also talked about an update to the area plan framework for the order and timing of a couple of those plans kind of in the center part of the overall schedule. So in 2026, we are actually going to be working on parts of 5 different area plans, which is a lot of work for us. It will be a lot of work for you. We look forward to bringing you the final drafts of the Southeast and Southwest area plans in the very near future and moving those towards adoption this spring. We will also be making substantial progress on the downtown area plan as well this year. And as we get towards the end of this year, we will be kicking off the north and near west area plans as well. We are currently talking with several agencies that we collaborate with closely on these area plans about additional process improvements that we can make to the planning process before we start the next 2 plans to make sure that we have good coordination around what types of recommendations and at what level go into those area plans. All right, so for the next service to highlight, this is our plan implementation and design section. So this is a really wide-ranging service, covers all kinds of implementation activities that might come after we prepare a plan. And so you saw a lot of this work last year, particularly around ordinance development and amending our zoning code. So this work is in collaboration with many of the folks from the zoning team that are in this room tonight. And many of you as elected officials and plan commissioners. But we updated the building demolition review and approval process. We also worked on, I think it was 14 distinct changes to our zoning code over the course of 2025 that were aimed at trying to support our housing forward goals, particularly around residential infill and continuing to right-size our transit-oriented development overlay standards. In this body of work, we also were coordinating with a number of our neighboring communities on regional growth issues, specifically related to incorporation and intergovernmental agreements. I mentioned at our last meeting that we have been working for some time on a potential intergovernmental agreement with the Village of McFarland as we prepare for the final attachment of the town of Blooming Grove to Madison in 2027. We are working on the final attachment for the town of Blooming Grove in 2027. And we were working with a number of our neighbors to the north as the town of Westport is pursuing incorporation. So that cooperative plan was on one of your recent agendas as well. And then another item that I think some of you may know about, but we have been working with a number of downtown partners around the redesign of the Mifflin and Carroll plazas at the top of State Street as the Wisconsin History Center redevelops, and making a plan for the future of what that space will look like, how it will function, and how it will operate. So as we look ahead to 2026, we will be building on a lot of that work that I just mentioned from last year. Specifically as it relates to code updates, there are 2 big ones. We will be bringing forward recommendations for changes to the UDC, the Urban Design Commission, and the Urban Design Code. The process and the code itself. We also will be talking with you at some point this summer about some early recommendations that we have for how to develop an ordinance specifically related to data centers. You may remember we passed an ordinance issuing a moratorium on new data centers. So we will be bringing that policy, some discussion of that policy to you this summer. And then ultimately the ordinance itself will come to you through the referral process. And then believe it or not, we are getting ready to prepare our next comprehensive plan implementation update. We have switched to doing this every 2 years. So we will be working with all city agencies to figure out what else we have been able to move forward from the last comp plan and pulling that together in a report to share with you. And with this one, we are specifically looking at how to create linkages to the recently adopted area plans. We're not entirely sure, but we don't think that we're going to issue separate implementation reports for the comp plan and each of the area plans, but we're still kind of working through exactly what that will look like. So moving into development review, this is obviously a huge part of what the Plan Commission does at all of your meetings. So just want to summarize these activities here for you. In the far right column, you can see the total by each of these 4 application types that the Plan Commission reviewed in 2025. There were just over 150 applications that came to the Plan Commission in 2025. You can see the breakdown of them there. For some projects, they might have included multiple applications. You know, they might have included a conditional use and a zoning change, for example. But this is the total number that you reviewed. And I wanted to note here that this is lower than in previous years. One of the ways this is lower is specifically in the demolitions category. The commission saw about 35 fewer demolitions last year than it did in 2024. And we think that a big part of that is as a result of the change to the ordinance for how demolitions are reviewed by the city. You'll remember that the commission now only reviews demolitions that have been determined by the Landmark Commission to have historic value. That said, we did have fewer demolition applications across the board in 2025 as well. So that number is lower there. This is the summary then of the residential and commercial, either number of units, lots, or square footage that was created or was included in the applications that the Plan Commission reviewed. And I will say this doesn't represent all of the new residential or commercial space that was permitted by the city in 2025. This just represents what the Plan Commission saw in 2025. So you will note that there were just over 2,500 new multifamily units that were approved as part of the land use applications that the Plan Commission saw in 2025. This is the second year that that number of units has decreased from the peak in has decreased. We definitely have seen that that number is lower than the peak in 2020. We're closer to the numbers that we saw in 2019 for new multifamily units in particular. One reason for this decrease, again, could be related to changes in city policy that have been made in the last several years. As we have pursued zoning code changes under Housing Forward, have rezoned property, have more proactively planned, particularly for where we want to see more housing, there are more projects that have been able to come to the city as what we call a permitted use, which means that they can proceed to the zoning team to pursue permits without needing to come to the Plan Commission first for a conditional use request. So we are seeing some of that. For example, this year we did see a 241 unit multifamily building proposed at 2150 Commercial Avenue. Bless you. This is in an area of the city that was rezoned to the RMX zoning district, which allows for most multifamily housing developments to be a permitted use. So the Plan Commission only saw that project because it involved a certified survey map or a land combination. But the multifamily development itself was reviewed by the Urban Design Commission, but ultimately is a permitted use that will proceed through an administrative approval process. So there's some of that certainly in this number. And we are working to improve our data pipelines to make sure that we have a clearer picture of the gap between the units and the commercial space that's represented by the Plan Commission's approval process, and then what we see on our housing dashboard when projects start construction and are actually counted in that way. So we know this isn't a holistic picture of everything, but it is also a number we're watching closely to see if there are any real trends in our market in terms of how many new homes or other commercial space are actually being brought to the city for approval as well. All right, and then I think this is the last category here that I'll highlight, data and mapping. In 2025, we updated the Neighborhood Indicators Project, which is a collaboration that the planning office has with the UW's Applied Population Lab. So this is a screenshot of the Neighborhood Indicators dashboard here on the left. This pulls in a number of data from the census, from the city, from area partners, and displays it in a publicly available resource at a number of different geographic levels so that we can, make information about our community available for people to use for a number of purposes. This is a partnership we've had with them for a number of years, and we update this data holistically every 2 years. So we updated the data in 2025 and relaunched it. And as part of that, we also created, we synthesized the data at the area plan level so that we can use that better in our area plan process. And we also made a dashboard available with that area plan data. This is now on our area plan web pages, or on our area plan web page, I should say. So this is a screenshot again on the left of how we have provided that data in a dashboard at the area plan geography level. In 2026, we are going to be working on actually breaking this dashboard out and having a standalone dashboard for each area plan, I guess I should say, directly on that area plan page so that folks can see just the data available for that part of the city. We are also working on some collaborations with the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is part of the planning division, to provide development and projection data for them to use in an update to the regional plan and the regional transportation model. And we're trying to make some other tools available on our website to help with things like zoning data and other kind of planning related data on an online map as well. So those are some updates that will be coming next year. So I'm going to transition into talking a little bit about the Plan Commission's work plan for 2026, but I'll pause there and just see if there were any questions about the Planning Division's highlights.
Question. I should remember this, but the Neighborhood Indicators Project is always, I know there are new types of data, but it's always limited by just being from the previous census, right?
Do you know about that? For census-related data, I think we do have a mix of the previous census. We might use some ACS data. And then some of the data points are not actually from the census. They may come from other data sources as well, so they could be updated more frequently than the census. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, the school district, some are from the city. There are other sources as well.
One other question. I realize this fantastic resource on the web is so much easier to look at, serves a purpose. Have you also thought about tracking denied applications as a function of time? Or analogous quantities?
Have we? Well, denials are rare, I'll say. We don't have that number, but they do happen very infrequently. I'm looking to the staff to see if we've ever talked about that. Yes. Yeah.
Might be interesting.
Yeah, come up to the microphone. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. We do track the information, it's just it's not published, but that would be a very easy number to track. We just haven't historically put it in our annual report, but we do have that.
For example, I think last year we could probably count on one hand the number of denials that we actually had.
I would think
it may
so,
not have
yeah.
even been one hand. Yeah.
I'm curious if it's changed over time though.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yep.
Thanks.
I'm assuming that we're also coordinating with Madison Metropolitan School District because they're looking at restructuring boundaries and things like that, which we're probably vitally interested in too.
Yeah, great question, Alder. This is not one of the things that I highlighted, but we did talk about in our annual report that we're really glad to be restarting our coordination with the school district. We're happy to have Scott here as the school district's new representative on the commission. This past year, the staff from the district and our office, as well as leaders from the school board, the plan commission, and the council, we attended 2 tours of recent developments or developments that we anticipate in the near future across the city to try to coordinate around the growth issues that we're seeing here in Madison and the relationship to the school districts. It was a great opportunity also for us all to hear and learn about the different ways that the school district is experiencing growth in the city. It's definitely not even. And we also had a presentation at one of your special meetings last year from the district representatives about the boundary work that they're going to be doing, that they are doing. So, yeah.
If I can add to that too, potentially a special session here this year. One of the sessions will come and present again, kind of world building for the future and how we're looking at the boundaries and how the city is growing. And like I said, partnering and trying to understand where we need to shift our boundaries, because we have some pressure points, and what is also the future, right? What does the far west look like, the far east? Because we've got some property and we don't want to keep pressuring some of those schools that we currently have pressure on the far east side. There's got to be an outlet, right? And so we've got to be smarter about what we do and not feel the pressure first. Like, we've got to be planning to keep pressure off. That's all to keep people in our district and our city. So we're being very conscious about that.
Do we ever do models of 2040, 2050, where we think like for some of these, where do we think people will live or what the housing will be?
Go ahead. If you want to speak to that,
Yeah.
Scott. Yeah.
Yeah, we have got a consultant group working with us right now, MGT. We've taken data and kind of the pattern of the data that's been shown over time. So we're doing studies now, it looks like in 2030, 2035, and 2040, and kind of modeling through that. We're showing a little bit of recessions of students just because modern data is telling it's really degressing, but look in our city and it doesn't ever fit the model, right? So you look at every model, it tells us we're losing students, but we should have been down a lot of students, but we're holding. So it's kind of offsetting. So we're actually thinking, like, if it does grow, it's only going to expand certain problems. So how do we get ahead of that and using that model as part of our boundary studies? It may not look like it now, but we know if this, then that, right? So we're building those scenarios forward so we can go to the public and saying, we've had X, Y, and Z, and also we looked at if this happens too. So we're really trying to be very forward about the information, and then what we see is only the crystal ball. But when we do have to make choices to the public and ask for certain things or to talk about it, we really want to be open about it and then get the feedback. Like, that's never going to happen. Okay, great. What if it does? Or, like, okay, it didn't. Now we're going to pivot and do certain ways. Right?
And on the city side, we do look at our overall population and household projections by decade. But actually, it's still up here on the slide. One of the things that we do in coordination with the MPO is actually bring those projections down to very small geographic levels. They have a really technical term for them called TAZs, which they use for developing a model of our transportation system in the region. And so we work with them around that. But we're also talking about how some of that information is the same information that's being requested to help the school with planning, some of the city's utilities with planning and thinking about where they need to make infrastructure investments. And so we're actually working through some ways that we can develop that information into a tool that we can share with more agencies for the purposes of planning. So.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So we'll move then into the Plan Commission's work plan. So new in 2026, all BCCs are asked to consider their annual work plan. This is part of the overall effort to help improve the experience of being part of a BCC and to help make sure that the boards, committees, and commissions are well supported. So we've been asked to talk with you about a work plan. This doesn't have any specific format or requirement that needs to be met, but really is an opportunity for us to talk about what our purpose and goal is as a commission, talk about some of the activities that we expect to undertake in 2026, and then to just think about how any of those special activities that you may want to do as a commission align with the resources that are available to support you, specifically, how they align with staff, work plans, and our staffing resources. So as we think about the commission specifically, you are one of the boards that is, we call a referral heavy board, which means that a lot of your agendas is set by the development activity that's happening within our community and the specific application types that you need to consider. You're also a referral heavy board in the sense that you have statutory obligations to review things like zoning code changes and to make recommendations on our long range plans before they're adopted by the council. So there's a lot that happens on a day-to-day basis within your purview that's not really in your control, I'll say, other than to be good stewards of those decisions. But we do have this forum of our special meetings, which presents an opportunity for us to think about what are the broader topics. And this is something that you've been doing for a long time and I think have been doing really well. So what a work plan could look like for the commission is something like what's here on the screen. A recognition that your core work, that your review and approval or recommendation on all of those referrals are the main items that you're going to continue to work on primarily. We can put on paper some of the things that we think that we're going to talk about in your special meetings for the year. And then we can use this as an opportunity to talk about other trainings or refreshers that we might want to do on an annual or some kind of reoccurring basis, or maybe as a one-off. So what's on the screen right now is something that Emily and I put together based on just a discussion that we had about kind of planning for the year ahead, specifically here in the section about special meetings and other trainings and refreshers. So you see the items that are on our agenda for tonight that are already in that list. We've started to talk about what your summer and fall meeting agendas will look like as well. I mentioned that the data centers topic will come to you here this summer. We've also talked about requesting some presentation or some updates from the city's Department of Transportation about transportation plans that they're working on, and specific opportunity to talk about the linkages between those transportation planning activities and our land use and development activities that you often see. We've also identified an opportunity to take a deeper dive into regional growth issues. So how does Madison fit into the regional housing strategy, for example? Maybe taking an opportunity to dive in a little bit deeper on some of those intergovernmental agreements and intermunicipal discussions that I mentioned earlier. We also identified reaching out to engineering to request an update on the city's watershed studies and a discussion about the city's stormwater ordinance. This is something that comes up a lot when you're being asked to make findings and recommendations on conditional uses. And so we thought that getting a primer on that and an opportunity to discuss what happens after you look at a project could be really helpful. And then we saw Alderfield actually submitted a really helpful comment and request to get a little bit of a deeper dive tutorial into the neighborhood indicators project so that we know how to use it for other purposes. So those are some topics that we are thinking about for your June and September meetings to schedule for later this year. You, Scott, mentioned maybe having another conversation with the school district about the boundary review. We can put that on our radar. I don't know if there are any other specific requests for topics that we could put here as well.
Just because it's such a frequent thing that comes up in neighborhood meetings and so forth is, if I can summarize the question, you're always talking about getting more missing middle housing, but it's obviously very hard. What are the obstacles and what are we doing about the obstacles?
Okay. Yep.
I sort of even committed to District 19 that at some point I do a public information meeting on specifically those topics.
Okay.
But putting the information together on where that is and some of the things we're thinking about, some mundane, maybe some more a little out there on the fringe, to be able to do that something I'd like to hit at some point in time.
Okay. Implementing missing middle housing. That is a good topic, Alder.
I've got something off the top of my head. Maybe just a one-off of, I think it's good for plan commissioners to have the opportunity to talk to assistant city attorneys about things like affordability and how that should or should not come into our decision making, and that's what I'm thinking of right now. But other things too that are part of the standards of approval, make sure we understand where subjectivity lies and where it doesn't. And I just off the top of my head.
Okay.
And
All right.
I wouldn't want to ask Kate Smith to, give an hour-long presentation, maybe just some questions from us. I don't know.
An opportunity for a conversation.
Yeah.
Okay. And along those lines, Emily thought that it would be helpful to have maybe an annual refresher on our parliamentary procedures. So things like Robert's rules, how to make motions, as well as open meetings law. Are there any other things that you feel like as a commissioner would be helpful to have refreshers on or specific training around?
Maybe not as a compliance tool, but as something to kind of help us feel more confident as we're moving through the plan commission's business about, sometimes you're kind of like, how much detail do I want to put in my motion and into the comments surrounding it? What are the findings of fact? And I think those are muscles that you build over time through practice and not something that you learn and then you know it forever. So.
Okay. So motions and finding of fact. Yep. Okay. All right.
You mentioned the relationship between our planning work and transportation plans and policies. Does that include curb management yet, or is curb management still quite forthcoming such that we couldn't count on that yet?
It's still nascent, but we could ask for the Department of Transportation to touch on whatever's new since the last time they talked to you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Whenever enough information is available, I think that would help all of us with some of the more tricky
Parts of your
compact,
development review.
Yeah, sites. Thank you.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. Well, we'll update this then and share the revised version of it with you at your next meeting. And we'll use this as the guide for our work plan for the rest of the year for the commission then. So thank you for that. Are there any other questions about this topic in general before we move on? All right.
I just have one
Oh, I'm sorry.
one last comment and then we can move on, which is if things come up, just send an email, like maybe don't copy the whole commission, but send an email to me or Megan or both of us, because we can certainly work things into the agenda ahead of time as ideas come to mind. So thanks.
All right. Thank you.
That's concluding our, okay. All right, so that concludes our discussion on item 2. Item 3 is Legistar 92440, and that's our discussion of that's our update on Housing Forward. And Matt is here with Megan to help along. And Matt, I'm not going to say your last name right, so if Wachter, so Matt Wachter, thank you.
Yeah, so Matt and I will co-present this one. Matt Wachter is the Department of Planning, Community, and Economic Development Director. We just say PCED here, it's easier. And so we've asked Matt to come and talk specifically about some of the city-led development activities, and I'll quickly just recap a little bit about Housing Forward. I think most of you know that Housing Forward is a city initiative to support our overall housing needs. As part of an update in 2025, we established a goal to create 15,000 new homes by 2030 using a multi-pronged approach to supporting that housing growth. This includes a number of strategies related to increasing housing choice, creating affordable housing, combating displacement and segregation, and working to end homelessness. So we're not going to go into all parts of this tonight, but we can follow up with any of the topics that you might want to hear more on. And we're going to focus tonight on increasing housing choice and creating affordable housing. So these are some of the highlights that you as a commission worked on in the last year in particular. I'm just going to move this. Some of the specific strategies under increasing housing choice were about making lot division and subdivision processes simpler to create more new lots for homes, pursuing code changes in support of that missing middle, the Alder Ugair mentioned, and overall continuing to simplify our zoning standards to support infill. So I noted earlier the number of code updates that were made in 2025. These generally fell within a couple of buckets. The first is to update the zoning and subdivision codes to support that residential scale infill. So you saw zoning code changes related to allowing 2 units in all residential districts across the city, continuing to adjust our allowances for accessory dwelling units, creating this new cottage court housing type and allowing it in most residential districts, and then allowing 3 and 4 unit residential housing types in residential areas in the TOD overlay. Some things that you also saw related to how land is divided. We changed the standards for deep residential lots, so essentially allowing more backyard lots for homes to be created on, reducing some of the lot size standards for residential property across our residential zoning districts, and then dealing with how new development in higher intensity zoning districts kind of fits in next to those residential areas. And we also addressed one of the underlying drivers of density, which was the open space standard, and we eliminated that requirement for usable open space separate from just our general lot coverage limits. The next group of code changes dealt with residential development forms. So I'm not going to get too far in the weeds on this. We did make a zoning code change that dealt with a lot of these things that we see as frequent barriers when people are trying to build or remodel their homes. So just in general, trying to make it a little bit easier to build and maintain a home in the city. And then we also had this bucket that I mentioned earlier about updates to the transit-oriented development overlay standard. So we tackled some of the development types that were making it a little bit harder for us to realize the more intensive development pattern that was really intended by that district. And we also prohibited a few auto-oriented land uses as new standalone principal uses within that district. And then finally, some of these ordinances were also related to the development review process that is used. We already mentioned the demolition process and the code changes for that earlier. We also made a code change that increased the threshold for the size of a project within our downtown zoning districts that would be considered a conditional use. So allowing more of those smaller multifamily and mixed use developments in downtown to be a permitted use that could proceed to permitting. And we also rezoned a select number of properties within the TOD overlay into zoning districts that are more consistent with our future land use recommendations based on some of the recommendations of the West and Northeast area plans. So all those are to try to help streamline the process for development and creation of new homes. One thing I don't think we talked about with the commission too much about last year is that our 2026 operating budget also created funding for an additional position within the engineering mapping team. And this was specifically about kind of identifying a place where projects can sometimes get stuck just due to staff capacity as they go through the technical review that our engineering team is involved in. This affects people who are looking at CSMs, rezoning sometimes, a lot of the work involved with the technical review of these projects. So at some point this year, they will hopefully be bringing on some additional capacity to support that development review team. So that was just a very quick summary of where we've been on the kind of increasing housing choice side, mostly through policy changes and in some cases through process changes. So I'll let Matt talk more about what we've been doing to increase affordable housing throughout the city.
Sure. So on the affordable housing side, it's really a lot about making it happen through funding tools and then through more active development role for the city. And so where we do a lot of this, click at myself.
Yeah, you can just click it yourself.
Where we do a lot of our affordable housing development is through money, through tax incremental financing and the Affordable Housing Fund. So these primarily fund large tax credit developments that you see, but also smaller things that we do. And then land banking is a tool where we buy land to sort of set it aside for affordable housing development. And then the CDA is the Housing Authority and the Redevelopment Authority, and they are part of this department. So they own, operate, and develop housing. And oftentimes when we do something really hard, it requires that we use all of these tools stacked on top of each other. So a lot of my examples today, though, I'm just click here, are going to focus on the land banking and CDA side of things, which we do less of, but important projects. So just to start off with, when we make the decision to sort of play more of the role of developer, we don't do this lightly. And that's partially because it is very resource intensive. These projects take multiple years. It's usually a staff team that has real estate buying land. It has the housing authority bringing on developers. It has planning, doing test fits and community outreach. Community development division is bringing in money. So we'll have 4, 5, 6 staff dedicated for years to make one of these developments go forward. We also, if it was an easy project, we wouldn't do it. So we only take on usually harder, more complicated, and oftentimes more expensive projects. And so we try to do things that are very strategic, where we're trying to, solve not one problem, but 4, 5, 6 problems at a time when we do these. And so I'll go through sort of where we've been focused recently. So for the last probably 5 years, most of our land banking efforts have been focused on South Madison. And that's because a bunch of things aligned. We had the town of Madison attaching, so there was new land available, but also a lot of need that was we saw. We had the South Madison plan telling us sort of where we needed to have redevelopment happening. We put a new TIF district in place that had a lot of money available to do things. And then in South Madison, the CDA was already a large landlord and had holdings. So it made sense for us to really focus our attention for a number of years to find strategic sites to buy in South Madison. And now in the last year or so, we've broadened our search scope a bit more. We're always looking along transit sites, so BRT, 30-minute bus service areas, or and that's where the policy that guides us tells us to look. But we're also looking at opportunities to acquire sites that are set up for missing middle housing. And we also have an emphasis on where can we add ownership where there might not be ownership opportunities right now. So an example of a recent project where the city sort of played in this case, the CDA played the role of developer was at Teresa Terrace. So the CDA owned 2 duplexes that had been deemed obsolete, and they were developed as public housing. We moved the public housing designation to another site. And so we owned the site. We had restrictions from HUD that said when you redevelop it, it should really have an affordable rental component as part of it. And we knew that we wanted to learn more about missing middle housing and sort of why are we not seeing this scale of development happening in infill sites. And some of the things that we learned is that it's hard. Building 6 units is as much brain damage as building 50 in a lot of ways. It's difficult too because it's a scale of housing where there's not a large obvious pool of contractors who want to do this. It's it's bigger than a single family home contractor would do, but it's not sort of worth it for someone who's used to doing 50-unit buildings all day. So that's a difficulty. The building code, you're not in the 1 and 2 unit, you're in a more commercial side of the building code, which means you have to do things like sprinkle the buildings. But again, it's a small, sort of not very common sprinkler system you have to put into these things. So there's a lot of those sort of lessons that we learned. Also, this was sort of this was before some of the zoning code changes that we talked about. So if we did it today, we'd probably have more flexibility in how we developed it. But these are open. As of the end of the year, we have 6 families who are a lower income, and they are affordable to them. So it was a successful project, but it was definitely hard. We learned a lot from it. Another project would be here on Park Street. So the city land banked this site in 2017, thinking that we were going to develop it. The development didn't happen. A number of years went by. We saw a need for affordable housing for youth who are aging out of the foster system, and we had special money from HUD set aside to do this. So we had a site that we owned on great transportation. We had this sort of special housing need that we wanted to fulfill. So we, in this case, decided, well, let's partner with a developer. And so we brought in a developer who, this was their sort of first ground up development. So one of the things, by us owning the land, we could be really patient with them. So while they went and got tax credits, figured out all of their funding, those sorts of things, we could just wait and hold the land until they were ready to do the project. And so we're under construction now. I think it opens late 26. So this is just a case where we decided we didn't have to be the developer to do it. And that is how some of these land bank deals will happen, is where we'll turn around and through request for proposal, find a developer who is the right fit for the type of project that we want to see happen there. And then this is another one that's sort of interesting. So it's the Voigt Farm. So in this case, a developer bought the site and decided to go and develop it. And as they were sort of going through it, they realized that they had a financial gap. And so they came to the city looking at how can we help fill this. So as they were putting it together, they were meeting a lot of the objectives that the city put forward in the plan to have a wide variety of uses, housing types. They wanted to have a wide variety of affordability levels and a mixture of ownership and rental. And as we underwrote it, what we found was that some of these lots were a bit more of a drag on the economics, and they tended to be the ones that were set aside for affordable ownership and for missing middle type housing. That's partially because it's a lot of infrastructure for the amount of housing you get on some of those lots. So one of these large lots, you get 150 apartments on it, and you have, the same amount possibly of street and sewer as these lots where you're only putting in a dozen townhomes. So what we decided was those made sense for the city to land bank. And what that let us do is, by buying these sites, we could hold on to them while the land trust got ready to build, while Habitat for Humanity got ready to build, because it takes time. They've got to put their money together, do a lot of things. And again, they need a patient landowner who can sit there and wait while they get things ready. So we solved that problem. We got money into the hands of the developer earlier because we sort of were pre-buying these sites. So we filled some of their financial gap. And we got to hold on to these sites that made sense for missing middle housing, so we can make sure that that's what gets built there. But we can then control, is it home ownership? Is it, what the income level is, all of that. So we get to ensure that that happens as part of the development. So again, we're trying to solve multiple problems with this tool of land banking. And so the developer could go ahead and build the regular market rate housing right there on the site as the first project is under construction, and we are working through our deals with those nonprofits, waiting for the last of the streets to be put in, in the next couple of months. And that's happening over here. We have lots of maps of the same thing. And then do you want to cover this, or?
Yeah, we'll just wrap up here by saying this is just a highlight of some of the things that are in Housing Forward and even of some of the work that's being done. So happy to answer any other questions that you might have about these two topics of housing choice and affordability. Wanted to end here with just a quick reminder that last year we also launched this housing tracker, which is available on the Department of Planning, Community and Economic Development's website. So the community can see how we're tracking towards that goal of 15,000 new homes by 2030. Since January 1 of 2025, 2,800 new homes have been completed, and there are another 4,739 under construction. So with those projects that are in the pipeline right now, we're about halfway to that goal. So we still need to continue doing that work, but we're about halfway to that goal as of right now. And you can see in the bottom right just a map of where the completed and under construction projects are, which are really across the city. There's not any one neighborhood per se where this development is happening, but we're seeing this across the city. And then the last one here is just a snapshot. We also have a page on that housing tracker to track the the affordable housing creation. So within the goal of 15,000 new homes, we also set a goal that 25% of them would be affordable, would have some component of permanent affordability. And so this helps us track our progress towards that goal as well. This is lagging a bit behind the overall goal towards housing creation. So we're just under halfway to that goal with what's under construction right now. You can also see here just a breakdown of recent development in terms of how, what affordability level, the graph here in the bottom left, helps us see of the new homes that have been created since the beginning of 24, at what affordability level were they? Market rate, or did they have some level of subsidy in terms of their affordability? I also wanted to note, I appreciate that Colin helped us look up, earlier, we mentioned, the Plan Commission's development review activity for 2025. I think Emily had asked a question a couple of weeks ago just about how many of the projects that you've seen in recent years included affordable housing. This is often a question that comes up about, what is our role in terms of thinking about affordability? It's really at the planning and sort of policy level and thinking about the linkages to implementation that Matt and his some of the work he mentioned really is about. But you did see a lot of affordable housing come through your approval process in the last 2 years. So since 2024, the Plan Commission approved 23 projects, which totaled almost 2,700 new homes. So that was out of 48 projects that included mixed use or multifamily. So a little over half of the projects that you saw in the last 2 years alone were helping us add to the affordable housing stock that we have coming online within our community and helping us achieve that goal. So I just thought that that was a really important, helpful thing to end on, to let you know kind of how your work fits into that overall. So happy to answer any questions that you might have about this.
I think you touched on this a little bit, that working at smaller scale projects involves a lot of effort and a fair amount of expense. And so, and I think I've heard this multiple times in a variety of meetings, that our dollars that we have available to us go farther for some big projects than not. And yet we try to find some of those. Could you just talk a little bit about that difficult decision about how we choose some of those smaller scale projects, that just so we can continue to focus on that scale as well as the super scale?
Sure. So on the larger scale rental housing, usually the city is filling a gap, and most of the cost of the project is covered by bank debt and tax credits. So the federal government is providing the large amount of subsidy for those. So we're putting in something like, $20,000-$30,000 per unit to sort of fill that last remaining gap for that. When we get down to the smaller scale, there isn't a big federal tool usually that is paying it. So we're filling the entire financial gap to bring it down from market rate to 50% of median income. So that's the big thing. It's just we're not leveraging outside subsidy from other levels of government is the big part of it. And then home ownership is similar, where if you want to make home ownership available to someone at 60%, 50% of median income, you've got to fill an awful lot of gap because the size of their mortgage is really limited by their incomes. And we have a goal to try to solve all of these problems, but that is a limiting factor. The other limiting factor is when we try to use TIF to fill the gap, the project needs to create a lot of new tax increment. And these small projects that are 100% affordable, they're just not generating a lot of new taxes. So when we do a 200 odd unit apartment building that is rental, that has tax credits in it, it's oftentimes generating millions of dollars of new taxes over the life of that TIF district that we can then invest into the project. That's just not an option for a fourplex.
The data on number of affordable housing units, does that include the student affordable housing units? Because I know that income's kind of tricky to
Great
different
question.
than 60% AMI.
I don't think it does,
Yeah.
because our definition of affordable here is usually that it's got Allura tied to 60% in AMI. Our student housing isn't tied to AMI. It's tied to, are they receiving financial aid and are qualified through the UW? So the affordability definition is different. So I don't think we're putting that in here.
It's a really good question, though, especially as we've seen more developments in the past couple of years take advantage of that process, that maybe there's a way we could think about capturing that. Yeah.
Matt, just a question about land banking. I just want to make sure I understand it. You mentioned that buying those lots at Starkweather provided money to the developer, and that's because they are also the landowner, right?
So yeah, actually, it's a little more complicated because there's the land developer is two developers who partnered on it. They won't necessarily be the developer of each of the lots. So they'll develop some of those individually. They could sell off some, and yeah, I use them interchangeably, and I shouldn't.
But in the greater scheme of things, they're also those developers are the landowners, or will be, if they're not already, right? And that's why the money is advantageous.
Right. So with raw land development, they're fronting millions and millions of dollars to put in the infrastructure, those sorts of things before they build a building. So by pre-buying those lots, it helps soften that burden a little bit.
All right.
Yep.
Thanks.
Alder Oaklist.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. I did want to ask, are you tracking vacancy rates by AMI across projects that the city is funding? I heard a comment from a developer that where we have, it's not just where we put the housing physically, it's how much investment we put in to set the AMI. And I've heard that maybe we have too much 80% and not enough 60, or vice versa.
I don't think we're actively tracking in city funded properties what the vacancy is by AMI and bedroom size. I don't think we're getting anywhere near that granular.
Okay. Is there any way to track vacancy by AMI?
Is there stuff in the CoStar report about?
So our sources of vacancy, we used to get data from MG&E where they'd be able to tell if a meter was turned on and off, and it was nice because it was updated quarterly. They don't provide that anymore. So one of our main sources of data that Megan was talking about was CoStar reports. They're grading buildings in a different way, and it doesn't really tie to AMI. It's number of stars, which is like a kind of quality metric, and it is not nearly that fine.
So we don't get, when we are funding Allura, we don't get reports on how many units are filled or anything like that?
No,
Okay.
no, we're not actively tracking that. I mean, in our own units, we know, because, we've got 1,200 units plus our vouchered units, so we get data that way. Our units are full for the most part.
I think that could be challenging too, because the AMIs can move between unit types. So it would be really hard to track, even if you had consistent reporting over time.
All right, any more questions on our Housing Forward update? Thank you, Matt. And Megan, that's good.
All right, thank you.
All right, our next item is Legistar 92445, and that's our overview of single and two-family plan development rezoning. Oh, yeah.
Never mind. I will take that.
Good evening.
Matt and Katie, would you mind introducing
I was about to,
yourselves as
yes.
you
Of
get
course.
started, since I didn't get it, I don't know, without the Zoom windows to call on you by name, it's a little harder. So thanks.
Sure, thank you. Good evening. I'm zoning administrator Katie Bannon.
Matt Tucker, I'm the director of the Building Inspection Division.
I've got a couple of zoning team members here too. I just wanted to give a shout out to Esmeralda Tovar, who's a zoning and sign code specialist with the city, and Jacob Moskowitz, who's an assistant zoning administrator with the city, and they're part of the project team for this project. So you may be seeing more of them.
Welcome.
So we're here tonight to present about a project to look at rezoning single and two-family plan developments, or PDs, into what we call conventional zoning districts. So zoning districts that exist within the zoning code, can be used throughout the city. This project is really focused on single and two-family plan developments that are located on individual fee simple lots. So we're not looking at condominium development at this time. We could consider additional PDs in the future. I know that's been a question we've had already, but we want to start with these PDs because they affect many individual property owners and are the simplest to rezone into these conventional zoning districts. I'd be able to do it, okay. I don't have that many slides, so I guess I could have you do it, Megan. Thank you. Or Director Tuttle, sorry. But taking a step back, what we're really looking at here is moving kind of from some of the things you've really seen a lot as a group over the past 2 years in 2024 and 2025, which were these zoning code text amendments, where we're changing these rules that apply to various districts or to the transit-oriented development overlay district, all those kind of things to support additional housing. We're moving into kind of this next phase this year to really think about process improvements and technology changes. We know time in the development and permitting process is a big part of housing costs. Time is money, for sure. So anything we can do to decrease that time ultimately decreases the cost of providing housing in Madison. So with that goal in mind, not moving on. I talk a lot on this slide. I really went to the team and asked, like, what are the things we can do that will speed up the approvals you do? And this was the number one thing that they put forward. This would improve our customer service and speed up our overall response times from the team. So to give you an idea of the things we do a lot of things. We're really customer service oriented team. We help people at the zoning counter that have questions or want to get a permit. We answer zoning phone calls and emails. We do site plan reviews and building permits. All of those need to be reviewed by the zoning team. So that's the things that come to Plan Commission as well as the things that don't. We review sign permits, short-term rental permits. So speeding up one thing that the team identifies takes a really long time, speeds up all of those other reviews we have to do for every time a new business opens, they need a zoning approval. Every time new housing is created, they need a zoning approval. So PDs are these custom zoning districts, and you probably are all a little bit familiar with them through your work on the Plan Commission, that were really created specific to a single development. They were a common tool in the 1970s, 1980s. They allowed the developers some additional flexibility. They also allowed the cities some additional level of control at that initial stage. But most of these were pre our 2013 zoning code that we're working under today. What we found over time is that this is kind of set in stone, the zoning code that applies to these properties, or what we often call zoning text. And that's been a problem in a lot of ways because it hasn't adapted as we changed our zoning code. We still have the same zoning text created for this area of land that hasn't changed. It's created barriers for homeowners being able to adapt their housing over time. It leads to a more confusing and protracted review and approval process for owners of properties within these areas. So that's why we're coming forward with this project today. And this next slide, thank you. I don't expect you to be able to read this, just so you know. I wouldn't put this on a slide if I expect you to be able to actually read this. It is posted on the webpage that we'll share in a later slide if you really want to dig into the details later. But really what this slide looking at conveying is, there's a very different process if you're an owner of a property in a planned development who wants to do an improvement on their property or improvement on their house. So the left-hand side, I'll just say, for example, someone wants to add a deck on their property. The process is they can come into our zoning and plan review counter. They can bring their plans. We look at the zoning code, the building code. If it meets the code, they can walk out with a permit right that day. Start on your deck tomorrow. So that's kind of that left-hand side where we're really just looking to the codes that exist. They're available online on Unicode. We have a deck webpage that would give you all the information about what's required to build a deck in Madison. On the right-hand side is you make that appointment at the plan review and zoning counter, just the same as any other single-family owner. You're in a plan development. So can you give me your contact information? We'll have to get back to you about what applies here. So it's a very different experience when you're a plan development property owner. So we're going to have to go through the sometimes hundreds of pages, and there's a lot of variations in these PDs. So some are relatively straightforward and others are really complex. So in some cases, you may need to go to a private architecture review board to get their approval. In the zoning text, it says the city cannot approve any improvements until this private architecture review board approves the project. The homeowner will often be like, well, who's that? I can't tell you. Maybe check with your homeowners association. Maybe they know. We don't necessarily even know who to put them in contact with. Sometimes we're doing some internet sleuthing to try to help them through the process. So that's not great. We have times that there's a minor alteration required, so they need to reach out to their alder, reach out to the planning director. Sometimes they need to reach out only to the planning director. Sometimes they need to go before this group. Sometimes a combination of multiple things. It varies quite a bit. Sometimes there aren't standards in the zoning text, so they have to come to the Plan Commission because we don't have any setbacks. I can't help you. So it's just a really frustrating process for the customer. Yeah, that's really why we're looking at a change here. One question we've had is, how would rezoning these single and two family PDs change, for example, how a homeowner association can enforce private covenants? It really doesn't. So private covenants, the city is not a party in those. We don't know what's in those private covenants. In some cases where we have the zoning text where it says, yeah, you have to check with the architectural review board and get their approval before the city can make an improvement. We expect probably some of those architectural review boards, what they're doing is looking at those private covenants. So it's kind of been a de facto way historically that in some areas, perhaps the city is kind of saying, well, talk to them first and making sure the private covenants are met. However, we do know we have a number of homeowner associations that aren't planned developments that still enforce their private covenants, and that is something that can still be done. Yeah,
we actually have a few. It's really interesting when we did the study to kind of find all these and look at them. We found a few of these planned development, single-family subdivisions that were in homeowners associations that were kind of half in conventional zoning and half in planned development zoning. Boy, that's really challenging when your neighbor right next door has a straight line path to something, and you have a circuitous path to the right side, which we can't emphasize how crazy it is, really, to be perfectly honest, and how much of a surprise and it is to go down through that process. So when we've been looking at these, one of the things that we're trying to emphasize is that the ability to levy fees, the ability to have whatever reviews might be in place under covenants are not going to be changed with this project. Private covenants are not anything that the city is a party of. They change at the decision of the members that are party to the covenants. We just don't carry any water for them. The zoning code specifically excludes them. But this project is not going to negatively affect them in any way. They can continue to operate as they wish.
Yep. Can't remember, are you going to do the next slide or am I?
This one?
Yeah, do you want to hand it off or should I?
Go for it. You're doing great.
I mean, none of these goals will be a surprise if you're kind of hearing my story here of why we're thinking about this being a really good process improvement that we should take on. How do we make opportunities for people to make the changes to their properties, have clear, objective, easily accessible rules, consistent standards, easier building permit process, allowing neighborhoods to evolve beyond what was best practice in 1982. But the last one here too, I think is really important, is that we've been doing all these zoning code changes, and a lot of these areas, well, they're stuck in time. They haven't been able to take advantage of these things where we've been trying to provide more housing, more infill, more housing choices. 2-unit homes? Nope. And your zoning text says only single-family homes here. Accessory dwelling units, we didn't even think about that back then, but it's not a listed use, so it's not allowed. So this would allow more equity in the city to take advantage of adding more housing in new ways.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about it. These planned development residential zones were basically all created under our old zoning code. Some of you may have heard me say this before, but our old zoning code was originally written in 1966. 1966 was, I wasn't alive, and I feel like I'm old. The city has changed so much, and those places are effectively frozen in time and aren't able to take advantage of any of the code reforms that have come through. Now, let's be honest, though, like, it's not like these places are dying on the vine, right? They're fine. These are some of our strongest neighborhoods, but they have a much more convoluted and difficult process in order to get to some of the same places that by right zoning can just come in and walk out the door. And there can be some other kind of odd things that happen besides just, the challenges. I mean, things that we've learned about homeowners associations struggling with people and like there being some conflict. And this is not a place for that. And zoning needs to stay outside of it. It's the city's zoning ordinance that needs to be free and clear as being a tool of leverage on properties, at least we think. And setting that standard baseline of common rules for these properties will help them evolve over time.
Yeah, and you could definitely see, there's a geography of like where our growth in the city was happening at that time, where this was kind of a best practice, cool new tool. But, as you've seen, we don't really use this tool too often anymore. Our new zoning code really discourages it. It's really only supposed to be used if there's no zoning district that would otherwise allow this kind of development to happen in this location. So, there's definitely certain alder districts that have quite a few more bigger, larger suburban subdivisions. But 16 of 20 alder districts have at least one PD that has the single or family 2 houses in a PD on fee simple lots where it's like, well, this seems like it could be a go. So we've identified approximately 4,000 properties so far. We're kind of really looking deeply to make sure we don't miss any as we kind of think about what could be easily included into a conventional zoning district. I can keep going.
Yeah, you're doing great.
I made the slides, so. But we've done many of presentations with alders about this. So, just as we're thinking about, we really want to make it easier for homeowners to make just common changes to their homes. So the idea is that we're going to match a conventional district that has the most similar setbacks on lot area to these areas. Some of these PDs, they do have different areas, which do have different setbacks and lot areas. We expect some might be split into multiple districts, but really our overall goal is create the fewest nonconformities so that people are going to be able to make these changes to their homes.
And nonconformity means when the zoning rules don't match what's on the ground. So the thing that's on the ground becomes nonconforming to our laws.
Thank you, Director Tuttle. Yeah. Talk about not having plain language. We get buried to the zoning stuff.
You know, just to add a little bit to that, like when we establish these rules, we know some of these things aren't going to fit perfectly. The city has experience in making some changes to the rules as they apply wholesale to conventional districts. We changed the way we measured the rear yard setback in 2016. And people were really concerned, oh no, you're going to change the rear yard setback. We're going to create all this scenario of non-compliance with existing properties. We're going to have a groundswell of zoning variances. Gosh, I think we might have had a handful or so since then, very few, but we do have the ability with the zoning variance tool, which takes a look at like what was in place at the time these properties were developed and what is common for the way this property develops over time and how it is to be used. Commissioner Heck, I believe you spent a little time with me in the Zoning Board of Appeals and have been through that. It's a very effective tool to navigate the uniqueness of properties and to get them modernized. If we even end up in that situation, we're looking at, we think we might be in pretty good shape. We have found a couple of little things that we think might need tweaks to the zoning code. There's just some rules about lot frontage and things like that on streets that some of the plan developments might not meet. And as we kind of flush those out, discover them, we're going to have a small grouping of text amendments that we think will come forward that will be necessary to work with these properties too.
Yep. Yeah, and we know we have many properties today that have these non-conforming setbacks, and we have very few, I don't know, 12 to 15 variances a year, but those are the situations where it can be appropriate. All right, the public process. So we have a PD rezoning webpage that I mentioned earlier, cityofmadison.com/PD rezoning. We'll be, continuing to add information to that webpage as the project moves forward. We've been having individual meetings with alders who have PDs in their districts, and we'll be continuing to have those meetings and discussions. Here we are today, Plan Commission work session. So it's really important to bring it to this group because we like your feedback and questions and things like that. Ultimately, these are going to be like those TOD, transit-oriented development overlay, proactive rezonings that you all saw late last year where we're trying to implement the plan. These, like any other rezoning, will come before this group for a recommendation and ultimately council action. But I think what's most important to note here is, this is a rezoning. So we have a legal requirement ultimately towards the end that we're going to send postcards to these property owners and adjacent property owners within 200 feet. We don't want that to be ideally the first time most of these homeowners are hearing about this because it's scary. What are you doing to my property? So I think a really important part of this that we would love your feedback about is, how do we get the word out so people are hearing about this early, getting their questions answered, fully understand so it's not a surprise at the end. So a couple of things we are thinking about here is, making sure to be available for ad hoc meetings by request. We know we have some homeowners associations that overlap fully or very closely with some of these plan developments, so they might be good groups to meet with. We think a big part, I mentioned just that process of like, let me look at our files and get back to you. There may be some individual questions that we really want to make sure we have staff available on the zoning team to answer those individual questions of what would this mean specifically for my property? What are the setbacks today? What would they be in the future? So really being available to do that kind of one-on-one outreach. Talking to the media, getting the word out. And a really big thing, I think this was maybe Matt's idea, is, let's do a proactive postcard to property owners early in the process before we're doing any public hearings to get the word out about the website, about public meetings coming out, who to reach out to for more information. So we're looking at doing those coming up here in April and then having some public meetings in May. Then June, those legal postcards I mentioned, Plan Commission and council action. So kind of being a little bit flexible there about those exact dates at this time because we do want to get some feedback about that and just kind of see what some of the reaction and questions are that we need to answer for homeowners so they understand what this is all about.
And the idea is to bring this forward basically as like one ordinance. It's going to be kind of like one big map amendment, if you will, with recommendations of existing zoning to proposed zoning, very similar to how we've done the zonings on the attachments to the city over time. You'll see, if you recall some of those, Town of Madison, we just adopted maps that said this is what the property would be zoned.
So that's the end of kind of our overview, but any questions or comments from the group?
I have a question. I don't really understand how the variance process fits into this. If you create non-conforming properties, they don't need to get a variance for that. It's only if they want to do something after that, right?
Great question. Yeah, so it's not a problem if someone has a non-conforming, for example, side setback. I feel like that's the most common non-conforming thing that we have with existing single and two-family homes today. You can exist like that forever, no problem. You're not getting a notice of violation. It's not a zoning code violation. It's only when you want to put an addition on with maybe that same setback. So the most common variance, I would say, or exception to the zoning code that we see is a single story house. Someone wants to build a second story on it. Well, the first story is in the side setback. Those are pretty easily granted, I would say. They typically meet the standards very easily for a variance. Like, this is why we have an exception process to the zoning code to be able to put that second story on. But yeah, it's only when you're adding to that nonconformity, existing nonconformities that are lawful can just continue on.
Okay.
On their
So,
way.
just keep in mind too, those of you that are familiar with our 1966 code, the entire neighborhoods, like the Dutch Edmond Road neighborhood and Tenny Lapham neighborhood, much of it was non-conforming because the lots were smaller than 50 feet wide. And those neighborhoods are some of our strongest neighborhoods through time. Our 2013 code made many of those lots conforming. So having a non-conforming zoning hanging over your property is not a terrible, impossible situation. We'll have those variances for if and when, something comes up that is not, and is not possible, is totally reasonable and is outside of the control necessarily the property owner that is trying to do the project, and they're trying to develop and modify their house in a way that's similar to others. That's probably the best way to describe it. That's how we describe it when we talk to customers when they come to the counter wanting to get variances, is to try and help them find a way to commonality and similarity with their home compared to similar properties.
And with the zoning code, we have been able to, I think, build in things to really minimize variances too. Of like, okay, if you have a lot width that's less than 50 feet, 10% of lot width can be your side setback. We changed the zoning code last year, so you have the same side setback if you're a one-story house or a two-story house. Just a lot of those little pieces. You can replace a garage with non-conforming setbacks at those same setbacks, as long as you're not making the garage substantially larger, and there's certain dimensions of that. So, the nice thing about putting in conventional zoning district is they can take advantage of those things that, as we discover and continue to refine and improve our zoning code, that will apply to these areas too. But really, our goal is to find zoning districts that work for these properties. We're not really trying to make it a different rules.
Right, that kind of helps me understand why you're choosing the targets you're choosing in terms of single family homes essentially, and it will be so much more complicated for properties that got conditional use approvals and all these other things in the mix. That sounds very complicated now that I think about it.
Yeah, though I do think, often we have a development proposal that comes in, or it's an existing PD, and there's often opportunities, we have a newer zoning code now, and we have a zoning district that works perfectly for this. Let's rezone it into that district, and often makes it an easier process for that property owner in the short term and long term. So we do still do those things.
We do try to ask that question when projects come in that we see are in a PD, if, the work that's being proposed, or if that zoning district would fit well in a, to use that as an opportunity to convert them to a conventional district. So I can think of a handful of projects that have been in front of the commission recently where we did have the opportunity to do that. It doesn't always work for certain reasons, but we do try to ask that question. And I think this is the presentation that Katie gave you tonight, where we're focused on the single family lots, is a much different scale than an individual kind of multifamily mixed use kind of dense development, for example, downtown. However, I think it does illustrate the complication of approving these individual plan developments and their site-specific zoning codes as one-offs because there's not predictability. So some of the same concerns that Katie highlighted can be the reality for properties in the future as well in those contexts. So we're trying to be much more disciplined about not approving new PDs if it can be avoided. And we have to first make sure a new PD could even meet the standards for a PD, but we try to work really hard to see if there's a solution through a conventional district first before approving new ones.
Full disclosure first, if you want to know, one of the districts that has a large number of PDs, it's District 19. And if you want to put a new deck on in Wexford Village, if you want to call up your alder, that's me. And if you need the architectural approval, I'm half of the architectural approval committee. And I'm vice president of the homeowners board, and we will be presenting to the homeowners board shortly. But just because this would be a typical question, this is kind of practice for the three of us. So you mentioned that the rezoning process for these PDs really does not disturb the covenants that are in place.
Homeowners Association covenants.
So as an example, because this would be a typical question, this, at least from the homeowners board, is currently we don't allow any of those nasty ADUs, and we don't allow any of those terrible looking shacks and, you know, appurtenances like that. What's going to happen to those? You know, is my neighbor going to be able to put some terrible person in the backyard in an ADU, which is prohibited by covenant?
Terrible person, I don't know we can do anything about that. But if the homeowners association subdivision has a covenant that prohibits whatever the construction may be that is otherwise allowed by the city ordinance, it'll be to the parties to that covenant to enforce it. If they continue to meet, super citizen / Alder Ugair with his multiple roles in that, will be involved in that. And I think also through time, maybe people will think about what their covenants allow or don't allow, and they may choose to modify them. They may not go all the way, but they may. We don't know. We'll just wait and see. But we do know that the obstacle that is the plan development zoning will be, which is the city's zoning. You know, it's the city's zoning, not the property, a private property's zoning, will be not the obstacle per se.
Thank you. I'm on the covenants enforcement committee too. I think I'm probably going to resign relatively quickly.
Painful role.
But thank you for that clarification. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're pretty excited about this. You know, this is not really part of Housing Forward. This is kind of its own thing, just so you know. Like these map amendments are going to come on their own, different than text amendments, which apply to everybody. These map amendments apply individually to properties, so it's going to be quite an interesting thing. Very similar to TOD, as you mentioned, to some of the other proactive rezonings we did. But a lot of property owners that we interact with, and sometimes we interact with and have a extremely painful process. We're going to talk a little bit about the people that it took 9 months to get a pergola, or the guy that had to find the one guy was dead and they had to find the other guy to build the shed to get that approved. It was a nightmare. And
then he didn't decline to make a decision. So that's, if you remember that code change we had to make, I think, was that late last year, of like, okay, if you have a non-responsible architectural review board, the city can move forward at some point, because he was just
this is a
completely
problem.
stuck.
Yeah, this is a problem. They come and go.
Well, and just to chime in, sometimes those folks email their alder too about how the experience went. And so that's also why I see this as a tremendous opportunity for residents who have PDs.
Another question about covenants. Katie, I think I heard you say that sometimes hypothetically somebody comes to zoning and you might know that there are covenants in place, or you might even say, you'll bet you should check this. But that's the extent of your role, right?
Yeah, just from a customer service perspective, we do
Right.
try to let people know when we know. But yeah, it's really
Covenants, easements, I mean, if we
Ah,
know,
right.
but
Yeah.
it's tricky. I mean, we want to be careful because we don't want to be responsible for not letting people know, like it's sort of like, it's a tricky conversation to have, but we do try and, we don't want to see people get caught up and have problems. And so we try and lay out as many of these things, and we'll say, well, make sure you check. And that's a very general statement that we offer to people.
So some of what might be kind of happening in the interim as we talk with some of these homeowner associations, making sure they have websites that have this information readily available so people do know what their covenants are, who to get in contact with, what the process is for that private piece that they also, will need to do if they have covenants being enforced.
This may not be for you, could be for others in the room, but is what happens typically is if it's an active homeowners association, the discussion happens, and but if it's not particularly active, I think, which is often the case, people don't even know they have covenants. An applicant could build that ADU or whatever it is, and eventually the only penalty would be is the homeowners association gets active or somebody complains, and then that's a lawsuit potentially or whatever between those parties without the city being involved. Isn't that how it works?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's the part we don't really know,
Yeah.
because sometimes they've expired. Is there some kind of statute of limitation?
Expirations. Yeah,
so
yeah.
covenants often expire after a certain period of time if you don't take proactive action. This is my little bit of understanding, and I know Kate can't speak to it either because it's
Not giving
very
legal advice,
specific to
these are private.
Yeah.
Thank you. So a covenant is essentially a contract. And so only the parties that are or the original signatories of the covenant are actually in control of anything. And a lot of times what happens is when the house, the person that you bought the house from or the person who bought the house from them a while back was actually the person who agreed to the covenant, but it carries along with the piece of property. And so when you buy a house, you do get informed usually that there is a covenant, but you might not know the details or, I think anecdotally, oftentimes when people are in the home buying process, there's also just so much information in front of them. Something that was mentioned to you that, there was a covenant that is attached to your property. Oftentimes I think people don't realize it until they come to zoning to try to do something and then realize that there's all of these other steps to jump through. Unfortunately, in terms of what the city can do about covenants, it's really quite limited because we've never been a party to them to begin with. There are certain time periods where they expire. Some are invalidated because they have a racial component that's been deemed unconstitutional at this point. But other than that, we really don't play a role. We can't give guidance on what might happen, but you're correct that the avenue that the risk you might take is at some point the homeowners association might sue you to undo what you've done, but we have no role in that and no way of knowing how often that happens. My guess is kind of rarely, but that's pure speculation.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
I could just add to that, just informationally, that what we've seen over the last decade is that in more and more cases, the realtor or whatever party is handling the closing fails to provide any information on the applicable covenants. And so the number of surprises that we're seeing from government, well, I wouldn't have bought it if I had known that, for instance. We're just seeing more of that. And so there's some more awkward conversations. The other real truth is, you know, for the most part, we're dealing with single family homeowners associations. And the economic fact is that they may be collecting sufficient funds to do their regular activities, but they're and to the extent that they're accumulating any reserves, it's for, you know, as we have in my district, we're saving it to rework walking paths and lighting and things like that. There is no spare money hanging on trees to actually get deeply involved in the kind of litigation it takes to overturn someone who's violated a covenant. And so we'll see what happens as this go forward, as more and more people may want to take issue with that.
Thank you.
Yeah. I didn't really expect this to go here, but this is something I've been meaning to talk with you about for a while. So not to give you more work, but there is a provision in MGO 28.147, negative use restrictions prohibited as against public policy, that does actually restrict the usage of restrictive covenants for things like, it's specifically meant to prevent people from putting restrictive covenants that ban grocery stores or drugstore purposes after termination. It's very specific, but it does actually make the city party to a restrictive covenant. And so I guess I'd be interested to know if you know the history of that at all, and if the city could do similar ordinances for non-grocery stores, residential restrictive covenants.
Can I ask you guys to take that one offline? Because I think it's kind of out of scope of our agenda, very, very respectfully.
Fair enough. I
Okay.
will.
Yeah, I want to
I also don't know
prioritize.
the history, so I would
Okay.
punt anyways.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's a follow-up item, a parking lot item for the meeting. So I appreciate it, though. No, it's a good discussion. And my one comment is, you know, in my limited experience, the builder is a builder who's developing a project for a homeowner is going to say, do you have an architectural review committee? Do we need to go talk to John Ugair and make sure that we're allowed to do all these things that you want to do to your house? And so, I mean, hopefully, to me, that's where the real enforcement is, if assuming that the builder knows that they should do that.
For a new.
Well, or a remodel, or an
remodel.
addition or something
Well,
like that.
we even find some builders shy away when they learn a property is in
Yeah.
plan development zoning because of the red tape and bureaucracy and delays to construction.
Yeah, I
And,
mean,
you know,
some of the, I don't know. Yeah, the quality of the ARC probably has a pretty wide bell curve
Mhm.
from good to bad. So anyway, just an observation. Can I ask, I do have one other question, and that's just a nibble around the edges. So this is planned development for single family and two family household lots. Is there a next phase that talks about planned developments for other kinds of properties?
not at this point in time. I mean, we'd like to see how this goes. You know, there are some projects that we know that are out there that probably would fit into conventional zonings. And there may be a proactive opportunity in the future, or we may also have when they come to our front door option that we always offer them, hey, you could do this, or you could choose to zone out if you want into conventional district. We always have that conversation. We generally have that conversation.
And if I could just speak for the zoning team too, I think one of the reasons why this is a focus is because the amount of city resources involved in providing the support to the individual property owner compared to the work that they're asking to do it's not proportional.
Yeah.
And so where I mentioned earlier, sometimes we have the opportunity to move other types of projects into conventional districts when, say, a property is being redeveloped or significantly altered, a mixed use or multifamily development, for example. So we still look for those opportunities, but maybe just not as widespread, because those properties either can be a little bit more stable in terms of the long history of what they're developed and used for right now, or just because they're of a scale where, maybe we can more easily navigate some of the questions that we get about them. But at this level, it's not sustainable for the customer or the staff.
Kind of an 80-20 rule, yeah. Great. Any other follow-up questions for Katie and Matt? Thank you very much. All right. That'll take us to our last special item, which is number 5, Legistar 92435, and that's our housing snapshot report. All right. All right. You are. Somehow we lost. We lost the video. Oh, you're pulling it up. Oh, got it. Okay. Yes. All right. Planner Punt is.
Yeah, that would be nice.
That won't work. All right. So Colin soloing, no Heather. Okay. All right. Thanks, Planner Punt.
All right,
All
thank
right.
you,
It's
Chair.
always good to see you.
Thank you. So I will be talking about the housing snapshot. I'm actually going to be able to make this a little bit quicker because Megan and Matt talked a lot about the policy side, and this is more the data side. The housing snapshot is intended to be exactly that, a snapshot of the city's housing situation at this time. We just put out very late last year or early this year the 2025 version of the housing snapshot report. It is available online. I think everyone has a copy here. And I just want to kind of give a pretty brief overview, but it is very full of data, so may get bogged down in a few places. I'm going to start back with a little bit of the policy things. Some of the things the housing snapshot is looking at are the things that are impactful on the housing market, but then also things that we as the city have control over. And so this isn't in the snapshot, but kind of interesting to kind of set the stage for. So some of the things that we have no control over or very little control are interest rates or the cost of labor, the cost of construction. We have a little bit of control over our growth rate, but not really a lot on that. We have little control over the paint colors of houses, but that also has no to little impact on those costs. Some of the things that we do have control over are zoning, and we've talked a lot about changes to the zoning code that we have made through Housing Forward. That has an impact on land costs, and all of these things are then interconnected, and zoning and land costs thus impact property owner decisions, timing on building and improving housing. So all these things are interconnected. And then there are the things that that Director Wachter talked about, city funding for affordable housing, city-led development, often through the CDA. And those have a very high impact, especially on the provision of affordable housing in the city. So getting to some of the data that is in the housing snapshot, we cover a number of data points on households. First of all, we are a majority renter community. It's pretty close to 50-50, but we are we do have more renter households than owner households. One of the other thing is that is touched on over and over again in the snapshot is affordability. The graph on the left shows cost burden amongst both renters and homeowner households. About a third of all households in the city are cost burdened, and the definition that we use for affordability and cost burden is if you spend less than 30% of your household income on your housing, that would be affordable. If you're spending more than 30%, you are what we would refer to as cost burdened. If you are paying more than 50% of your household income, we would call you severely cost burdened. So about half of renters are cost burdened, about a quarter are severely cost burdened, less so for owner households. It's about 1 in 8 owner households are cost burdened. In the snapshot, this is something different that we have done this year. We've tried to humanize some of this data. We've put together these example households. These are based on real life examples. So this is one, a hotel clerk with 2 kids making $35,000 a year. 30% of that income equates to about $875 in rent a month. But even with a deeply subsidized 3-bedroom apartment, they're still paying more than that and are cost burdened. And these are real rents from real buildings in the city. A single person who's a dietitian making $70,000, about 80% AMI, could afford $1,750. They choose somewhere with good access to transit. Maybe there's trade-offs there. They're spending more than that 30% on a market rate unit, but that's a choice that they are making with trade-offs there. A family that is right at 100% AMI can afford about $3,000 a month, and they buy a condo and that's their mortgage payment. So tried to include a couple different options or examples so people really understand, because very often the idea of what is actually affordable to different types of people is something that people that perhaps bought their house 20 or 30 years ago just don't understand, so it's important for us to have that information out there. This is a graph that we've included in one form or another throughout the years that we've had the housing snapshot. It shows that the number of renter households and the number of rental home options at a cost affordable to that income group. So from left to right, you've got the lowest income households and the housing units that are available to them. On the far right, you have 80% AMI or higher, and the households that are there and the homes that are available to them. So on both the lower and higher ends, there are more households than homes. And so both of those groups then kind of squeeze into the middle where there are more homes available. And so you have the higher income households, renting down for lack of a better term, to more affordable units, where you have the lowest income households needing to rent more expensive units than they would otherwise be able to afford. This is a similar pattern to other Midwest cities of our size. We did look at census data from other cities, but it is a more pronounced pattern in Madison than it is elsewhere.
Sorry, Colin, are UW students in this data?
Yes, there are UW students in that 30%. We figure there are about 5,000 to 6,000 households that would be counted in there. So that, that does have some effect there. So, the things that the city is doing for these very low income households, we have the CDA administers Section 8 program to support low income households with the voucher system for 30 to 60. We're pretty aggressively supporting subsidized, income restricted, rent restricted housing through the Affordable Housing Fund, through use of TIF. Over the past decade, the city has put almost $47 million toward creation of new rent subsidized units, including about 300 some that are at 30% or lower, and about 1,400 units for 60% AMI households. The map here shows new affordable housing in the city, similar to what we've got in the housing tracker. The purple is our new units that were built with city financial support. The yellow are buildings that were built without city financial support, but may have got tax credits or some other funding source. On the other end, at the upper end of the market, the market rate rental side, it's far less common for the city to directly subsidize that market rate housing. Very narrow situations that TIF might be used for in certain situations, but a lot of those zoning changes that have been made in recent years are one of the purposes is to make that multifamily residential construction easier and more predictable and ease those regulations and increase supply. As far as that new housing, okay. Thank you. For the so as I mentioned, where the zoning changes are making it easier to build different housing types. About a third of the new homes completed in the past decade were in buildings of 100 or more units, but that is now kind of increasing. I'm sure many of you have maybe seen the trends as they're coming across this commission. A lot of much larger homes are being built. And this, is a quick snapshot from the housing tracker showing that, again, a lot of that development is being spread across the city, but a lot of it is also infill and in the TOD overlay downtown. 45% of the new development in the past 10 years has been in the TOD overlay, 17% in downtown alone, and in the past couple of years that those proportions have really increased. Kind of continuing that market rate rental support, policy support, talking about the vacancy rates for rental, the healthy vacancy rate where renters and landlords are kind of balanced out is in that 5 to 7% range. We are sneaking up that way, have not been there for many, many, many years, but are trending in that direction. It's important to note that the rental and homeownership markets are very closely connected. There are many renter households that could or would transition to ownership. At some points in their life, many ownership households would transition back to renter. So there is a lot of back and forth. Again, our vacancy rates for ownership units is also quite low, lower than what would be expected from a healthy market, which is around 2%. So encouraging, new housing types suitable for home ownership is another policy issue that the city is wrestling with. One of those things is the zoning changes allowing condos, cottage courts, more missing middle townhome style development. And hopefully, as we continue to make those policy changes, those code changes, and use of other programs, we support more home ownership choices. Additional partners that provide affordable home ownership options, habitat, things like that. There's programs like down payment assistance, education for first-time home buyers, because the home ownership market for first-time home buyers is extremely tough. At the moment, there are high interest rates, much higher than they have been in the past couple of years. There is a serious lack of inventory. Construction costs and labor costs are continuing to increase very fast. And then if you're a first-time home buyer, you're also getting crunched because there is competition from other buyers that are maybe making cash offers, or they already have a home and they have equity. So it's very difficult for first home buyers right now. This is a kind of a difficult graph to read, but I'm going to break it down here. The red and the blue lines show the average value for a 2-bedroom home, kind of a starter home, or a typical condo in the city. In 2015, they were around $150,000, $60,000. Now a 2-bedroom home averages over $300,000. The green line, or I guess I'll say the gray line first, is the average interest rate for a 30-year mortgage over time. As you can see, starting in 2022, that has increased tremendously. And then that has impacted the green line, which is the price that is affordable to the median income household led by a 25 to 44-year-old person in Madison. So that's kind of what you would expect your first-time home buyer to be. And that change in the interest rates really impacts the actual purchasing power that those households have. One of the interesting things about this is that the cohort of households under 35 years old is our fastest growing household age group. In the past 10 years, we've added about 9,500 households under 35. During that same time, we've added about 100 households under 35 that are homeowners. So less than 2% of that, almost 10,000 households are able to purchase homes in Madison in that past 10 years. So just, further evidence that it is very difficult at this time. There are many other things that are happening in the home ownership market that are affecting those costs. Over the last decade, land costs in Madison and the construction cost index for the upper Midwest have both increased twice as fast as inflation. Owner costs have gone up at about the same rate of inflation, but renter costs outpace it. Even if we get to a healthy vacancy rate, 5 to 7% for rentals, 2 to 3 for ownership, there are so many other costs that kind of prohibit creation of new housing below a certain limit. I'm going to touch on this one very quickly. This was a data point that was asked to be added a couple of years ago about the transition of single unit homes from ownership to rental or vice versa. It's been very stable since 2021. The couple of purple areas that you see there are actually pretty easily explained. The one on the northeast near Reiner Road, there's actually a company that is buying lots and building new rental units on single family units on there. Something similar is happening in the southeast, but those areas have so few single family homes that it's actually almost a scale issue that I think there are probably less than 100 single family homes in that whole big purple blotch on the southeast side. But something that we can continue to monitor, but we have not seen a lot of movement here. Regarding homelessness, this is the point in time count for that happens every year in January. We are continuing to stay pretty steady between 600 and 800 total individuals that are homeless during that point in time count. Where most of those are just individual adults, very, very few unaccompanied minors and individuals and families. And then, as we are continuing to create policy and look for solutions here, the city and others are working to provide support for the housing. And it's not necessarily just to continue to increase shelter capacity, though, we are doing that. It's important to provide that support and stability and move people into more permanent housing. But, we do have a number of shelters that are at least providing some shelter for these individuals. And that is the end of my slides right now, but I am happy to take any questions.
Not so much a question, but it was really great because as an alder, you hear all your building is low income or all your building is not affordable. And so to see it on there and to have this housing snapshot out there and that it's been there's a large chunk of both that's happening.
Yes.
Was great to see. The one question I have is, can you, and maybe this isn't you, clearly describe when you talk about Section 8 versus 60, 80, 40 AMI, because they're two different. One is 30% of your income. The other is 40, 60, 80% of median income.
Yes. So the Section 8 is a program that is administered through our CDA and provides housing vouchers that those households can use to pay rent in various units throughout the city. When we are providing financial support for affordable housing and leveraging some of those low-income housing tax credits, when we're using TIF, the Affordable Housing Fund, we are helping to create homes that we then have there's a restrictive covenant that's placed on there that identifies a number of units for a certain income level, and that is typically 30% of area median income, 60% of area median income. A lot of the tax credit buildings that don't get support from the city will have 80% income units, but those are that separate program from the Section 8. You know.
So just one thing I would add about the vouchers that you asked about. The voucher allows someone to rent an apartment or a home at whatever the rate is that is being offered. There are some limits, but are not required to rent a unit that is restricted, that the rent is restricted. And the purpose of the voucher is for them to pay whatever is 30% of their income. And then the person who they're paying rent to is made whole for the balance of that rent by that voucher. So that's the federal money that flows through the CDA to pay that rent, which is different from actually capping the rent and saying it needs to be held at a level that is affordable to a person that was earning this much money.
And just. They're all dying.
Sorry, we had a meeting in here all day long today, and so all the microphones are on their last.
But we also have CDA housing that isn't a voucher that can't be moved, and that would be thinking Truex or
Some of the Triangle.
Triangle. I was
Yep.
trying to, I didn't want to say Triangle, I was trying to think of a street. But so those are ones that then your voucher doesn't move and you move out and you don't take it with you. Correct.
Right, those are the city's own affordable housing units that they maintain. Yep.
I think it's helpful to just as we're talking about the differences between those, that the Section 8, as you're talking about, is purely based on that household's income. But when we're talking about 60% AMI units, Section 42 LIHTC, those rent standards are based on a number of assumptions, including the assumption that there's 1.5 people per bedroom. So you can actually have a rent that, someone is at a 55% AMI income level, they're renting a 60% AMI unit, but they're a household of one, and the rent is sized based on 1.5 people. So it is still, there's a mismatch there where even if they are in a subsidized unit, it will be a little unaffordable to them.
And you could see that in some of the profiles that Colin highlighted, where sometimes the person who's actually living in that unit is still paying more than what would be considered affordable to them. That's part of the reason for that.
Yeah, I just wanted you all to explain it for those listening, because I get that all the time, and I've explained it many of times, but it's also good to come from you, Colin. The other part would be, so when our median income, thinking WIDA and tax credits, and that is the 80, what is our AMI for here?
I think for a family of 4, it's about 110 or 120,000.
Okay, and then for a single, is it still 78 or something like that?
I think it's around 80.
Around 80.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right. If there are no other questions for Colin, we'll let him go and go to the end of our agenda. Thank you. Yeah. All right. We have time on our agenda for member announcements, communications, or business items. I don't know if anybody has anything they want to share. And seeing none, we'll move to the secretary's report and give Megan the floor.
All right, you've heard from me a lot tonight, so I'll close it out, I guess. Just thank you for all of your attention. Thanks to all the staff who came and shared important updates with the commission tonight. The main item that I wanted to flag that was not printed on your agenda is that we did receive an appeal late last week for a conditional use approval that was on your last agenda. So the conditional use approval that the Plan Commission granted for 5555 Odana Road and 5534 Medical Circle has been appealed. That appeal will go to the Common Council for their review under our ordinances. So just wanted to make you aware of that. That will likely be heard by the council at one of their meetings in May. We're working to schedule that right now. Otherwise, we will keep you updated on other items. We did share a note with you last week, I believe, that we also received an appeal of the denial for the outdoor amplified sound request for Minocqua Brewing on East Washington Avenue. We do expect that to be heard by the Common Council at their April 21st meeting. Otherwise, the agenda includes a number of updates about items that will be before you at your meetings in April and into May. So we look forward to pretty robust agendas at your upcoming meetings. And as always, feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions about any of those items or the appeals that I mentioned tonight.
Thanks.
If it is like term for alders or staff.
So there's a swearing in date, but I don't know what it is.
Great question. This, I apologize. We should have talked about this earlier. So this is actually one of your last meetings as a body before the Alder elections. And then many of the terms will be resetting. So we have several plan commissioners who are at the end of their terms, and we expect that the mayor's office will be contacting folks about interest in reappointment and potential reappointments if you haven't already been in the near future. I don't have a specific date yet for when the non-alder appointments will happen, but we do know that there are a number of you whose terms end in April of this year. If we do not have appointments made before that, we will ask those plan commissioners to continue for 90 days. That's allowed in the ordinance so that we can move through those appointment process. For alder appointments, I believe those will happen pretty quickly after the alder election and then the swearing in April.
Thanks. Any other questions for Megan? All right, I think maybe we're ready for a motion to adjourn. I think Alder Field and Alder Glenn got those in. It was neck and neck. So yes. Any objection to adjourning? Seeing none, we'll stand adjourned. Thanks everybody for good meeting.